Hey, everybody, welcome back to the NC State Insider Podcast. I'm your host and lead beat writer, Tucker Sennett for NC State on SI. Exciting day. First podcast with a partner today, my assistant beat writer and film watcher extraordinaire, and actually my fellow Sun Devil alumni. That feels weird to say, but Daniel Rios is joining us today. He's I'm sure if you've been tuning into the website, he's been putting out a lot of content more focused on the nitty-gritty, and what these guys are going to look like ultimately when they suit up for Wolfpack football in just a few weeks here against East Carolina. Dan, anything you want to say to introduce yourself some more?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Like you said, more of the nitty-gritty stuff. Kind of like watching the film, figuring out, where these players can succeed and how they can help the Wolfpack, have a more successful year than last year. So, that's kind of my thing. So, anything football is kind of my strengths. So, yeah, I'm excited to get talking some ball today. So, let's get going.
For reference, when I have questions about, you know, schemes and formations and stuff, this is who I go to. He knows his stuff, and he's going to provide us with some insight that maybe I might not be able to provide, even though, I'm seeing a little bit more than Daniel is in terms of boots on the ground, but he's my all 22. That's what I'd call Daniel.
Yeah.
Um, so today we are into week two of fall camp, which feels weird because it still feels like summer. Little bit of a torrential downpour today here in Raleigh. A lot of rain. So the guys were in the indoor facility, which kind of, you know, I'm not sure whether they practiced at all outside today, but I kind of hope they did a little bit because,
Yeah.
down here in the fall, you're gonna get some weather. So these guys, hopefully, will be ready for that. Anyway, we were able to talk to three different players today that spoke to the media. Linebacker Kenny Soares Jr., cornerback Jamel Johnson, and tight end Cody Hardy. These guys all transferred in. That's kind of been the theme this week. A lot of transfers in terms of who we've been able to talk to media wise, and some interesting stuff from this trio, especially Kenny Soares Jr. with he came over from Northwestern, so Big Ten background. Didn't get a lot of playing time at Northwestern, which is not ideal in terms of experience. But this is a guy who's played a lot of college ball so far, and this is a team that needed some help at linebacker, and hopefully we'll be getting it. But an interesting takeaway from what he had to say that sort of fell in line with a lot of the other defenders that the media has talked to, um, was there's some serious respect for DJ Elliott's background as a professional, as a coach in the NFL. If you don't know, Elliott coached the Eagles linebackers back in 2023. And um, Dan, what what did that group look like in 2023? I know Hassan Reddick was there, but
Yeah.
it was sort of a downturn from making a Super Bowl the year before, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, the Eagles in 23, they were kind of a middle of the pack kind of team. If I remember correctly, they were like 11 and I think that's the year they lost to the Buccaneers in the playoffs
Hmm.
if I want to be correct. So
Yes.
it wasn't the defense wasn't nearly what you're used to, right now. But I mean still I think NFL experience coming back down to college, it's a lot more simpler to kind of get these guys to kind of understand how to be professionals and especially, within a defense and things like that. So I think even though that I don't want to, diss the Eagles linebacker core of 2023, but it wasn't as good as people are used to it being now. So um still I think go to the NFL, you learn the schemes, you learn all that, you learn how, hey, how do these professionals handle it? And then you go back down to the college level and you're like, all right, I could take what I've learned there and teach it to these, these young men and, get them into a position to be successful. And that's kind of how I see DJ Elliott here. And I think this linebacker core has a lot of athletes in the room. Sean Brown Jr. has been one that I've really kind of looked at and converted safety. He's poised to have, I think a breakout year upcoming in 2025. Obviously, it remains to be seen, but I think they added, just a lot of athletes, a lot of guys who can rush the passer, can play coverage, can, perform these stunts, and you know, I think you're going to see a lot of 3-4 fronts that will be, transitioned into maybe a four down lineman set or maybe a bear looks or it's going to be, rotating in and out each down, each possession, and that's what I think is going to be lethal about this. North Pack front seven is every down it's going to look different. It's going to look, um it's going to confuse, quarterbacks, offensive linemen, and that's ultimately the name of the game of college football is how can you just confuse the opponent with simple but what looks challenging kind of fronts.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with this defense is going to look different, both from last year and week to week. Based on what these guys are saying, versatility is kind of a big recurring theme. A lot of these guys are kind of learning multiple techniques. I talked a little bit about it yesterday with defensive end Sebastian Harsh coming over from Wyoming. He mentioned that he's learning how to play both on the edge. He's learning how to rush on the inside shoulder, and then also learning how to play on the inside as well. Given that he's not quite as big as some of the other guys on the team, but apparently has been wrecking some stuff in training camp, and that kind of is a natural segue into the next guy we talked to today, which is Cody Hardy, a tight end who transferred in from Elon. Interesting jump from a lower level, I believe Elon's FCS to FBS. He seems pretty unfazed by that transition, and we've seen that before. I can't really think of anybody, Dan, if you think of somebody that of recent note made that transition very well. Feel oh well, I mean our alma mater, Cam Scatterbo, made that
Oh,
transition.
well,
So different, a little bit
that's
different,
that's
but
bad of us. We didn't even think of that. Like
yeah, yeah.
we're just that's wow. But yeah,
Um, But this is a guy who was brought in largely because of his blocking, um, and is sort of bringing a competitive edge to this team. He he certainly talked a lot about that today, and I don't know. I think my question for you, Dan, would be what's the importance of a blocking tight end going alongside sort of an elite pass catching tight end like Justin Jolie?
well, I think obviously I'm out myself here. I haven't watched any FCS film of Elon last year, so truly my fault. I don't know if this guy can, catch the balls efficiently and run routes efficiently as Justin. But I think it allows you to go into those more 12 personnel looks, which is, one running back and two tight ends. And you saw a little bit of those tighter formations from North Carolina last year in the games that I've watched, and they really tried to get, their zone scheme going with, outside runs and things like that, read options with CJ Bailey, but they really were never able to set the edge as efficiently and as you want in an outside zone type of scheme. So I think adding Hardy will kind of allow them to get these two bigger bodies in. Maybe you can line them out wide, and I think it just gives them more creativity within the 12 personnel to, hey, we can have, even though that we have these two tight ends on the field, and you may have to sub in another linebacker to combat that. You still have Jolly who can come out and, you know, catch the ball, and maybe Hardy is a pass catcher that we'll kind of have to see as the season goes on. But I think it just gives, um,
I'm just
what?
going to interject there. He is not a pass catcher at
Oh,
all.
he's not a pass catcher.
He
Oh
had
man.
six catches for 36 yards a year ago. So he's very much of the blocking prototype. And I think I think this is a guy they brought in because of his competitiveness and because he, you gotta have a different look. This is a guy that Jolie mentioned at one point, I believe it was at ACC Media Day, as somebody that he could be on the field with and sort of be the the Kyle Pitt Jolie and sort of that Kyle Pitts role as a receiving tight end or just an oversized wide receiver, and this guy sort of operating as an extra offensive lineman.
I definitely he's on three or well 247 has him as 6'4", 268. I don't know. I could look at what he's listed on.
He's a big boy. He's a big boy. I can confirm that today. Um,
So I think that, kind of begs the question of I think that they're probably just going to stay in, that 11 personnel like they did a lot last year. But if they want to go to a jumbo look, Hardy can easily come in. I think just personally from just what I've seen, I think this team will, you know, thrive in more of like a 21 or like an 11 personnel. So you're getting those two running backs on the field. You're getting just Jolly lined out wide. Maybe in the slot, I think a couple times last year, you kind of line up in the slot and you just throw the ball up to him and he just comes down with it. It's honestly pretty special watching, his contested catching skills. And, you know, maybe Hardy doesn't bring as much as that, receiving threat, but I think when you're in a division, well, conference like the ACC and you got guys like, UNC now that has Bill Belichick and Clemson has an elite front, sometimes you're just going to have to, get big and be able to you know, match up with these type of defensive lines. And I think, Hardy's a guy who can come in and provide that in the running game. And a running game that, quite frankly, struggled really bad last year, even with a lot of the returners from last year. There were just a lot of times where, especially against the higher tier teams and Clemson and things like that, just opening lanes for any running back was kind of hard last year. So hopefully that kind of improves this year.
yeah, and interesting that you brought back Belichick because I had a point I wanted to make about DJ Elliott in that he seems to be sort of part of a trend that maybe Dave Doran has sort of caved to in that a lot of college football programs across the country are trying to go to that more pre-professional route. Obviously, UNC or North Carolina being the most extreme there, bringing in Bill Belichick, but also some other programs with position coaches that are either former professional players or you got some there's some crazy ones out there.
Oh yeah.
Do you think that's a trend that's going to continue to happen across the sport and be successful, or do you think this is something that's going to sort of ebb and flow based on the trajectory of players and their improvement over time?
Well, I think it's going to continue to grow. Michigan's defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, I mean, he's a big NFL guy. And, you know, that defensive line that they were able to kind of conjure up last year had two first rounders. So I think I think you're going to keep seeing guys that were assistants in the NFL come into these higher positions in college football just because, quite frankly, it's becoming a professional sport now, essentially with NIL and all things like that. So I think you're gonna want to see kids who are gonna want to be trained as professionals. I think that's the biggest reason why you're seeing UNC go on such a recruiting hot streak right now is because kids are probably buying into what Belichick is selling them. Obviously, we don't know how it's going to go, but he said from day one that they're going to operate that program like an NFL organization. So I think a lot of kids are kind of seeing that. They're seeing, hey, I want to play on the next level. How am I going to get there? Which programs are turning out professionals, or which programs are also going to put me in a position to succeed in a professional environment like the NFL. And right now, the clear answer for me is UNC. So I think you're going to see teams and coaches kind of go closer to that kind of format. And honestly, I'm one of the believers that I think that's why, guys like Nick Saban aren't in the game anymore. It's because it's not how it used to be and how recruiting is. It's a lot different now. And it's just, that pro style of, you know, format.
Yeah, and obviously Doran's the sixth longest tenured coach in college football, so this is sort of a sign that he's willing to adapt to a degree, but I obviously don't see him going to the extremes that some of these other programs have. And yeah, that's kind of it for the Wednesday takeaways here. Dan, thanks for joining me, and we'll be getting together at least once a week for the pretty much the remainder of the football season for sure. And we'll be talking Wolfpack ball, whether that's post-game analysis, pre-game previews, etc. It should be a fun season.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me. But I can't wait. Can't wait for Wolfpack football to get going here.
Of course, thanks everybody for tuning in. Please follow NC State on Wolfpack, or Jesus, Wolfpack on SI on X is what I meant. And at Senate Tucker, and also throw Dan. Dan, what's your X handle?
This is Daniel underscore Rio 72.
Right, right. Daniel underscore Rio 72 on X for all your Wolfpack updates. Thanks again.